For ad-free listening, our newsletter, special deep dive episodes and members-only benefits, you can subscribe to us at that'sjustwild.com. Hello and welcome to That's Just Wild with me, Steve Backshall.
And me, Lizzie Daly.
And me, Sarah Roberts.
The podcast all about nature, wildlife, and how I once got punched in the ghoulies by a gorilla.
Really?
Really?
The visual, I can't. I don't even want to ask questions right now.
Best not to.
I've got lots.
And today our subject is the cruel.
Cool.
That's right, we're looking for the Cruella de Vil of animals. And fair warning to our more sensitive listeners, we're going to be digging into some really gnarly animal behaviours, which could be quite intense. That said, I'm very excited.
Does that make us all a bit strange? Because I feel like we're all quite pumped for this episode.
Morbid curiosity. It is going to be a sensitive episode. I apologise for the nightmares I may be giving you in advance.
But it's a big part of the natural world, isn't it? I'm sure we'll cover a variety of topics, but it's cruel. It's savage. It can be tough out there.
It can. So there's a whole array of different factors that feature into this. And I guess if we were thinking about an animal that we commonly perceive as being cruel, it would be something like a fox or a stoat. So these are animals that in agriculture are commonly perceived as being cruel because they will kill more animals than they may consume. So it's what's known as chicken coop or hen house syndrome. A fox will break into a hen house. This happened to us when we were kids. We kept chickens and ducks, and the fox would get in and it would kill everything. And the slaughter, what appeared to be completely random destruction, would be wanton and wasteful. And with your anthropomorphic brain, it seems that fox is doing nothing more than being cruel. And, we talk about foxes killing for fun, killing for pleasure. But when you start to break it down, actually, if this was a wild scenario, the fox would find, let's say, a nest of several birds. It would kill as many as it could at that moment in time, and then it would take away what it couldn't eat and cache it for later. However, when you put that into the scenario of a modern chicken coop with, fences around it, it's very unlikely the fox is going to be able to take all those birds away. It might well get disturbed before it can even start. And so it appears it's just killed everything for no reason, but there is a deep-seated evolutionary purpose for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And this comes in many forms. Maybe we should start by giving an example of a species that you've seen or experienced being particularly cruel.
So I think I'm going to come on to ones that I think I can explain as not being cruel, though appearing to be. I have one scenario that to me does still feel to be pure cruelty, and I don't really see any evolutionary reason for it. And it's with leopard seal in Antarctica. Oh. So to anyone that doesn't know, the leopard seal, I guess it kind of fills the niche in Antarctica that the polar bear fills in the Arctic. It is the apex predator, and it doesn't look like any other kind of seal. They have a reptilian appearance to them that is deeply sinister. They're very big. The females are larger than the males, and they're at least half a ton in weight. Incredibly mobile. They will quite literally shake a penguin out of their skin. They are absolutely terrifying, and they are one of the only animals that is known to attack for what appears to be no reason and no purpose. This is one of the things we need to be careful about, because there has been a human fatality from a leopard seal in the early 2000s with someone who was on the British Antarctic survey. And, she was a real person. She has a real family. I don't want to, get into this too much. But she was snorkeling near one of the stations. A leopard seal got a hold of her. And when she was eventually found, her dive watch showed that she'd been taken down to more than 60 meters in depth.
Oh my gosh. Honestly, I can't think of a scarier scenario, because they're ferocious looking predators. Their teeth and their dentition is terrifying anyway, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And I would say that probably my scariest wildlife encounter was with a leopard seal, and it was for the reasons that we're about to go into, which are elements of cruelty.
I wanted to touch on that because leopard seals are fascinating. And I've also seen them in action literally stripping Gentoo penguins inside out in front of screaming tourists. It was quite a scene, to be honest. They're top of their food chain. They're absolute brilliant predators. And in the unfortunate scenario with that lady from Bass, it's rare. It's rare in terms of of that behavior towards humans. But when you look at how a leopard seal looks back at you with that kind of Joker-like smile and their sheer size and their presence and their intelligence, I think that's where this gets really, really interesting.
So you say that it's rare. Actually, for the amount of time that people spend in the water in Antarctica, I would argue it's not that rare. There have been other attacks, and attacks on ribs are common. We had a rib that was attacked while we were down there. So we were supposed to be filming leopard seal, and they're quite tricky to find underwater. If you're down there during the summer, you've got quite limited visibility. It's not that crystal clear winter sea because it's full of plankton, so it's quite green and soupy. And we spent a long time trying to find the right leopard seal in the right scenario. And when we found one, it was a big female. She was doing laps around this glorious iceberg. So we all got into the rib, got a dive kit on and dropped into the water. And she, first of all, came right up and did a big pass around us, keeping her distance, and then came around again, getting a little bit closer. And then she came in and she kind of does that thing that seals quite often do of, grabbing hold of your fin and giving it a little bit of a yank. And then she'd start coming up and flashing her teeth right into the camera, or flashing her teeth right into my mask, getting really, really close. And this is an animal that would have weighed 7-8 times what I did, with the dentition of, a bear, serious canines on it, and no doubt that it could have taken us all out if it wanted to. But it was the overwhelming sensation that over the course of our, 20-minute encounter underneath this jade green Antarctic iceberg, that this animal was working itself up into a frenzy, that it was trying to get itself into a state of mind where it could do harm. It was kind of like being in a pub on a Saturday night with someone who's had a few too many jars, and you can see them trying to work themselves up to be ready for a fight. That's how it felt. And there was no purpose for it. There was abundant food around,
Could it be territorial?
Well, could it though? And
I don't know.
If that was what it was, then why not give a couple of those warning signs, which any other seal or sea lion species would do? Blowing bubbles in your face, flashing their teeth. They all do that. But this felt like more than that. And it's the one thing over my entire career, like 27 years of filming with animals, that I've honestly felt like an animal is working itself up to doing me harm just for the purpose of doing me harm.
Well, you've sold it. I'm not going in with a leopard seal anytime soon. Okay, well, so I would say leopard seals have a reputation and definitely look kind of scary. This next creature is the exact opposite. There was a study by Jose Maria Gomez at the University of Granada in Spain. And it was a study of violent behaviour in over 1,000 mammal species. So she collected data, I think it was 1,024 different mammal species, and analysed over 4 million deaths within those species. Loads of interesting findings. Some of the animals that you probably wouldn't expect on there. For example, chinchillas kill each other more often than brown bears do. But my personal favourite is meerkats. Actually, one of the most murderous animals in the study were meerkats.
Wow.
Now, completely, you think of Timon in The Lion King and how lovely and friendly he is, or you think of Meerkat Manor but I did study dwarf mongooses, and I have seen them when they encounter another group or another business of mongooses, shall we say, and they are vicious, and it gets loud, and it's like a big spinning ball of fluff with stuff flying everywhere, and 20% of meerkat deaths are murders. And they're often caused by females. So meerkats are a type of mongoose too, but because they live in groups of related females and males, but mostly related females, what happens is it's a bit different to other mammalian groups in that the female is often in charge, and that dominant female, she wants to do at least 80% of the breeding. So if there's a subordinate adult female, maybe her sister, maybe even her auntie, maybe her daughter, that then decides to go and get pregnant, she'll get straight in there and they'll kill all of the pups immediately, and sometimes even banish that female out of their group, which is kind of certain death if you're in the Kalahari and you're on your own as a single meerkat. But sometimes they are allowed back in the group, but that is on the condition they become a wet nurse for her offspring. But yeah, meerkats, you don't think of them as malicious, but there you are.
That's slavery as well, isn't it?
Yeah, right? Exactly.
Can't trust them. Little snakes.
Cruel.
We touched on it already, but I'm fascinated by how in quite intelligent species and psychologically complex species, we have some of these like aggressive behaviors. So there's a few examples I wanted to give, species that typically we know groups that have these kind of high cognitive capacity are cetaceans, so like our dolphins and our whales, and our great apes, like chimpanzees. There was a really cool bit of footage that I watched actually of white-faced capuchins in Panama that, and not a great ape, but still a primate, still have kind of a level of self-awareness and a level of intelligence. But they were kidnapping howler monkeys, baby howler monkeys, and putting them on their backs. And no one really knows why. There was no real function for this. They weren't able to give them milk. And so a lot of these howler monkey babies would die. But these young male capuchins would just go around and kidnapping these little baby primates, which, again, it's like, is that sadism? Is that cruelty? It's weird. It's like across species as well. But kind of going back to the kind of higher level intelligence species, there's one that happens right on my doorstep. We talked about dolphins and how they're all evil previously, but the bottlenose dolphin is one that I will never trust. Steve, put that in the leopard seal category for me for two reasons. Firstly, there's a behaviour that I've actually seen pictures of off the Welsh coastline with bottlenose dolphin called porpoiside. And marine biologists believe this might actually just be kind of a play behaviour. But there's photos of bottlenose dolphins literally launching porpoise high in the sky for no apparent reason. No apparent reason. And if you compare, bottlenose dolphin is a large dolphin species, but if you compare them to the size of a porpoise, it can be easily done. There's no eating of them. It's literally just a case of attacking them, trying to throw them around, prolonged aggression towards them.
So I have another really brutal example from a dolphin. It's the biggest kind of dolphin, the orca. And I have on several occasions filmed what appears to be utter cruelty from orca. The one that really stands out was when we were filming in British Columbia, and we've been filming this pod of orca for a good while, mostly traveling, jumping, bouncing, doing all crazy cool things. And then they switched into predatory mode. And this pod of orca, I'm guessing there's probably like 15 animals, started hunting a male Steller sea lion. And that's a significant target. They are half a ton to 3/4 of a ton in weight. Like the leopard seal I mentioned earlier on, they have an incredibly impressive dentition. It's a serious animal. And they started off by breaching out of the water and landing on top of it completely, then slapping it with their tails, and then using their tails to propel it up out of the water. And once it was pretty much done and dusted, it was absolutely exhausted, it was seeking for solace in the kelp where the orca wouldn't quite follow. Then the youngsters started coming in. So the young orca calves were coming in and they were replicating the adult behaviors. They were jumping up and landing on it. They were trying to hit it with their tails. And if they didn't quite get it right, the adults would come in and they go, no, not like this, try it like this, and smack it with their tails again. This went on for a protracted period of time. And this Steller sea lion was just smashed, bearing in mind that each one of the adult orca, the males, could have weighed 9 tons in weight, and they're smashing it with their tail and doing it over and over and over again. But here comes the cruel bit. Once the youngsters had practiced all their skills, and this Steller sea lion, 500 kilos, 3/4 of a ton potentially of good eating, was done and dusted and exhausted, the pod of orca turned and swam away. And left it.
Come on.
They just abandoned it completely.
Did it die?
Almost certainly.
Imagine so.
We didn't see it die, but the thing must have had a broken spine.
Yeah.
It was absolutely smashed to bits.
You see, this is what I always bring up, though. I've accidentally swam with orcas once, and I was almost pushed to swim with orcas quite recently on a situation where we had the option and they were right there and we could jump in with them. And I was the only one, again, that was like, I just don't trust these creatures. I'm like, well, nobody's ever been killed by orcas. 1, how would you ever know? And 2, it doesn't need to want to eat me. It just has to lob me in the air 50 metres and that's me buggered anyway. I don't know. It just, ugh.
So to me, the intriguing thing is that all the way down that coast of America, there are countless examples of particularly things like you were talking about porpoises there with dolphins, but particularly harbour porpoises and harbour seal pups that are killed regularly by orca and then not eaten. It's called surplus killing. And it was as clear as day to us what happened, because these animals compartmentalize their day. When they're splashing around and playing and jumping and leaping and breaching, that's what they're doing. When they're feeding, that's what they're doing. When they're traveling, that's what they're doing, and that's all that they're doing. But then when they switch into teaching, that animal becomes a teaching tool.
Yeah.
They don't play with their food. They use it as a teaching aid. And the second that section of their day is finished, they compartmentalize and they move on to something else. And it's seen over and over and over again with Orca that the process of teaching their youngsters is just something that they set apart from everything else. And so, yes, they've killed an animal, which could make really good eating for all of them, but that was a teaching tool, and now it's time to move on. And we saw in northern Norway another example, which was, if anything, even more upsetting, which was we saw a little auk at the surface, one of the smallest seabirds. It's absolutely tiny. It's not much bigger than I would say a pigeon. It's sat at the surface, and a pod of orca came over and they started playing volleyball with it, and they were smashing it with their tails. They were lobbing it up in the air, like 30, 40 meters into the air. They played with this little auk for an hour, and it's a tiny bird. There's no way that it could provide a decent meal for any of those animals. And it was long dead after, 5-10 minutes, but they carried on playing because at that moment they were having a game of volleyball, and they don't eat the ball.
Yeah. And I think you're spot on. It's like, okay, that would be violent. And you mentioned at the beginning there about how we perceive these behaviors through the human lens. That is a pretty sick, violent behavior. But the possibility of just violence evolving for the sake of just being violent is actually quite rare. And I think you've outlined that perfectly as a great example, just to showcase the complexity of those species that have that kind of cognitive kind of ability to recognize that as important play behavior to teach their young. I will match that, though, with the chimpanzee brutality that we see, because obviously we know a kind of high level of thinking, very intelligent chimpanzees, and they engage in planned and coordinated raids of rival groups. And that includes stalking, that includes ambushes, killing of other individuals, disembowelment of other individuals, biting off limbs. I worked with this sound man once, Andy, who told me about a time he filmed chimps, and in his hand, this chimp hand, he filmed, and he literally just watched this chimpanzee stare at this heart still beating of this chimpanzee rival from one of the other troops, which just must have been like a crazy thing to actually see. But they are surely an example where that violence that we talk about goes another level.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of Jane Goodall's early work at Gombe was studying infanticide, patricide, massive violence between different groups of chimps, and all of these deeply unsettling behaviors. And they all feel more unsettling because of the fact that, it looks like you're looking back into our own past. And everything that happens with chimpanzees is kind of rent with the chimpanzee long call, which has to be the most disturbing sound in nature. And I mean, I've watched them tearing apart a red colobus monkey up in the treetops, and it was the most unsettling thing I think I've ever seen. But at the end of the day, that was just food. It's a different thing to what you're talking about. Murder.
This next story, I would advise, if anyone somehow has got this far, I would not listen to this with any children listening. This one is sensitive. So a lady in Uganda was digging in a garden when she saw an adult chimpanzee. She went to get some water, and as she turned her back, this large male chimp grabbed her 2-year-old by the hand and ran off with him. And although other villagers tried to come to help, it was unfortunately too late, and there wasn't really much anybody could do to save that child at that point. So I want to also highlight the fact Uganda is losing around 122,000 hectares of forestry annually. So there is a lot less space for the chimps that live there. It's home to around 5,000 chimps. The villages are spreading and agriculture is increasing because the people need to make money. Mm-hmm. And so more and more often we are now seeing that the habitat that the chimps live in is becoming fragmented, and we're seeing more and more cases of chimp attacks in this area. Now, if you've got to think, an adult chimp weighs about 130 pounds, which is about 60 kilograms, but they are also about 4 times stronger than a human. They've got longer arms, they've got crazy teeth. And it's not just Uganda. We've seen this behaviour in other areas too. I don't think that the behaviour is just malicious and comes from nowhere in these cases, but I think it just goes to show how important it is that we protect wild spaces and we give nature space. We give these animals space.
Cannibalism is a absolutely fascinating wormhole of cruelty, right? We see it evolving across the animal kingdom in multiple ways and seemingly with multiple kind of functions, if you like. So I watched a really interesting video recently. I wonder if either of you have seen it. It's of a hippo, and this hippo is actually munching on another dead hippo carcass, which is bonkers.
Had the hippo killed the other hippo, or was the hippo just eating the hippo because it was already dead?
Well, so good question. The video just starts with the hippo literally munching on this carcass. And of course, hippos, as we all know, are predominantly herbivores. They eat a lot of grass. They're everything about their digestive system, their dentition, everything is adapted to have a very herbivorous diet and to eat grass. There's a few theories as to why we may see this, and it's not impossible, but it's obviously not a common behaviour. So one of the things is perhaps for nutrients. So whether it's environmental pressures such as drought, perhaps a hippo may drift over to an available food source and have a little munch. Another one is territory. We just know how aggressive and territorial hippos can be. So perhaps there was a territory display, there was a death. Steve, have you seen the video?
I haven't. I've seen lots of videos of herbivorous animals eating meat, including rabbits, antelope. And actually, I think it's not that uncommon, particularly in areas where certain nutrients may be lacking from the diet. It's almost always carrion, usually meat, relatively fresh meat that rocks up that an animal's just kind of like, oh, I'll have a little, I don't mind dabbling. But, you know, in a world where protein can be hard to come by, a lot of animals that you might not expect will take advantage of it.
I think we need your hippo impression just to lighten the mood a minute.
But I just quickly, another example of cannibalism and how it's evolved in multiple different ways, even from the stage of being an embryo. Sand tiger sharks or grainer sharks, that is a behaviour that starts in the womb. So the first embryo that develops teeth to eat the other embryos, to eat its other siblings, will be the one to survive. And generally 1 or 2 of these pups survive. It's literally survival of the fittest inside the womb. It's savage.
The sharks, though, that give birth in that way, they're kind of attached to like a little egg yolk, if you will. And what happens is once they've used up and burnt up that egg yolk, they got to find something else to eat.
Yeah. It's a great packet of nutrients, isn't it? Just to start you off. And when you're in an environment that's crowded and, you know, you are literally in high competition, you do what you got to do.
To anyone who hasn't been freaked out enough that they're going to have massive nightmares from this episode, I would say look up intrauterine sibling cannibalism, which is what happens in sand tiger sharks, because there is the most extraordinary image that exists of that process happening, of the pups eating one another inside their mum.
What? Someone ultrasounded it?
It doesn't look like an ultrasound. It's more like microscopy. But yeah, it's absolutely wild.
So what about cannibalism in other ways then?
Have you guys heard of the Photorus firefly?
Go on.
It's also known as the femme fatale firefly, which is a story of seduction, betrayal, murder, and technically theft. It's a female firefly and she mimics the flash patterns of another firefly species. So she stands around, flashing around to attract a male. So he comes thinking that she's ready to mate with him, really, really excited, gets closer, maybe quickly realizes it's the wrong species, but it's too late by then because she eats him. So she seduces him, she tricks him, she eats him, and then there's another side of that because the female fireflies, they can't produce a compound that is actually tastes really bad to predators, but this male can. So when she eats him, she technically steals the chemicals, which are known as luciferin
and luciferase, is it?
Yes. Yeah, you just say it. You say it so much better than I do. But essentially, she steals that chemical and then she protects herself from, spiders or other predators in the process.
Love it. Love a bit of sexual cannibalism.
So I've got a bit of my own dark story from my home patch, which is all about the way things have changed on my stretch of river here on the Thames. So this is the time of year when we have an abundance of adorable little chicks and ducklings, and the riverside is just littered with all of these unimaginably cute little ones. Now, what would you imagine is the number one predator of those ducklings and chicks?
Pike.
Okay, it's a good start, but it's a no. Lizzie, any ideas?
Foxes? I don't know how urban you are.
It's gulls.
Really?
No.
So by far and away, the biggest predator are black-backed gulls, herring gulls, common gulls. I sat out on the deck with my 3 kids feeding ducklings, these beautiful, glorious little ducklings, a picture of cuteness. And this one single gull came in, swooped down, and scoffed every single one. Imagine how traumatized my children were. It was a bleak moment. But the bit about it that makes it feel cruel to me, I've been talking about all these things, that there are ways of explaining it through biology, that how it's beneficial to the species. But this is something that we've driven through our own human actions, because these gulls do not belong here and wouldn't have been here when my parents were kids. So in the 50s and 60s, we had the Clean Air Act, and the Clean Air Act led to us banning the process of burning our rubbish. And instead, landfill sites sprung up. And those landfill sites attracted gulls from the coastline inland, and they've been here ever since. And even now, today, our water birds have no defense against it. And it can be so tragic to see. You've got a moorhen who is battling against a gull that's 10 times her size and just comes in and scoffs every single one of her chicks. And sometimes you see entire broods down the entire length of river that are just systematically picked off by these gulls that do not belong here.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Those black-backed gulls are monsters, aren't they, as well?
They're huge. We even get, very, very occasionally, we get great black-backed gulls here. And that is a sight to see. It's like having an eagle rock up on the river.
Yeah.
And, we're 60 miles from the coast.
There's even clips of some of the black-backed gulls on Skooma Island and places where they have rabbits, and literally swallowing rabbits whole. And you're just like, you are just the most savage.
Clips. Yeah.
I want to share quite a sadistic story with you about another bird that we have in our ponds, and one not to be trusted, and one that might change your perception of going to feed the ducks. It's the mallard. So they are, out of all the waterfowl, known to be the most aggressive and notorious for what's called, or I'm going to label in this episode, sexual violence. So what's really interesting about this is that you can actually trace it in the anatomy of mallards. So male mallards have actually a 20 centimetre long corkscrewed penis. It's quite impressive. It's actually like the same, it can be longer than...
It's like the same length of their body, basically.
Longer, yeah. So it's, it's quite impressive. But as a result, because of how forceful they are and how they copulate, and they are so aggressive, and as I say, notorious in how they kind of approach females, the females have also evolved a very anti-clockwise corkscrew vaginal canal, essentially, to combat this aggression and to almost have like ownership of some kind of selection of the paternity and the success of this mating that you see.
So we've had getting drilled by ducks, getting eaten by chimps. What else have we covered in this episode? It's insane.
Getting drilled.
Well, it is, isn't it? It's a corkscrew.
How can you get away with it? Imagine if I'd said that.
Right, everyone's feeling a little bit worse for wear, but that is all we've got time for today. Remember, you'll have a Q&A episode coming your way on Friday, so remember to send your questions to questions@that'sjustwild.com and we'll get to it.
We are just a little baby seahorse or fry of a show. So any support is really welcome. You can follow us on your favourite podcast app, leave a review, it makes all the difference to the whole team. And for ad-free listening, our newsletter, special deep dive episodes and members-only benefits, you can subscribe to us at that'sjustwild.com. We're on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and you can find us at That's Just Wild Pod.
Thanks for listening. See you next week.